Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Mindfulness Broadcast. My name is Theo. Today what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about an analogy that I had just come across that I found to be really helpful as it relates to our practice. Um, but first, I just wanted to take a step back and congratulate you on being here because you're essentially showing up for a workout of your mind. You're here to train your brain. Um, and the way I tend to think of this is that we really have only two choices. The first choice is just to let our brains have their default settings. Um, and the second choice is to train our brains so that we are more adaptive to the environment that we find ourselves in. And if we leave our default settings as they are, then all the research suggests that we are going to be suffering from cognitive distortions and biases that really leave us with quite a lot of mental load that turns out to be unnecessary and makes us really unhappy most of the time. So, if we train our brain, if we develop these skills, these mindfulness skills, these neural skills, then we're going to have a much better time of life. So that's my hope for you as we kind of continue our mindfulness practice. And the analogy that I wanted to use today that I came across is this idea of a very fast car with very bad brakes. So if you can imagine your nervous system as being this very fast car with very crappy brakes, and what that feels like as you navigate your world. Um, we tend to get very revved up. We're very stimulated in the kind of environment we find ourselves in, whether that be through social media, whether that be through the workload that we all have in our jobs, whether that be in juggling all of our different roles with our families and our friends and our work and dealing with health and then the political environment. And I mean, there's just a lot. There's a lot. And oftentimes it feels like we're kind of strapped into this very fast car that has very poor brakes. And so, what we're up to when we engage mindfulness, engage neural training, is we're essentially swapping our brakes out for a new set of brakes. We're learning how to use these brakes that we're installing in order to slow things down a little bit, in order to gain a little bit more control over this fast car that we can think of as like our nervous system, our cognitive processing. And so, what I'd like to do today is just to kind of investigate how we can, again, use these new breaks in order to get better outcomes, right? We're here because we want to improve the quality of our lives. And mental training, mindfulness, is one of the best ways that I know to improve our lives through consistent daily practice, right? If we can consistently practice this skill, it will deliver over time. Sometimes we need to be patient, and we often need to use self compassion because it takes time to learn how to do this. But my experience has been that it definitely delivers. So I'm excited for you all as well to get the promises of the practice. So I'm going to refer back to my notes. So what I wanted to do actually was I wanted to share a story. It's a story that's been told in a lot of different contexts. I think it's a Taoist originally. It's like a Taoist story. Um, I'm gonna put a little illustration up here for you. So there's an image to go along with the story. The story is about a farmer who lost his horse. So the story goes like this. So one day the farmer goes out to his field and his horse has disappeared. And all of the people in the village say, "Oh, what bad luck you've had. Your horse has run away." And the farmer says, "Maybe, maybe not." And then a few days pass and the horse returns, but now the horse has brought two wild horses with it. So now the farmer has three horses, and all of the village people say, "Oh, what good luck you have. Now you have three horses instead of one." And the farmer says, "Maybe, maybe not." And then the farmer's son is training one of the wild horses, and he gets bucked and he breaks his leg. And all of the village people say, "Oh, what bad luck you have. Your son has a broken leg." And the farmer says, "Maybe, maybe not." And a couple of weeks go by and a war breaks out. And the army comes through the village and conscripts all of the fighting age young men into the army. And the son has a broken leg, so he can't fight in the war. And all of the village people say, "Oh, what good luck you've had. Your son doesn't have to fight in the war." And the farmer says, "Maybe, maybe not." And what this story is illustrating is the idea that we really have no idea what is actually going to be good luck or bad luck. We tend to have this reflexive process where we assign things good or bad. And those stories actually are really what tends to drive our sense of well being. And they can really start to perpetuate this process. And this kind of relates back to the idea of having the brakes on the car. It's often the case that if we haven't trained our mind, the stories that we tell ourselves about the circumstances we face lead to that out of control nervous system feeling, like that car that's going very fast and we feel we have little control over it. So what we can do, instead of just allowing those stories to kind of fester out of control in our mind, is we can take this mindfulness practice and we can apply it to whatever the stories are that we're telling ourselves in order to get a little bit more space between us and the story, to kind of calm that reactivity and to find some spaciousness within our own experience and to apply what's often referred to as beginner's mind, right? The idea that maybe we don't actually know what's happening. Maybe we don't need to assign good or bad to the circumstances as they play out. And if we do that, if we give ourselves a little bit of space, and this is often called cognitive diffusion, we can use cognitive diffusion in order to create a little bit of a buffer between all the things that are going on in here, especially as we navigate a very complex and chaotic world. Then we can start to rest easy. And in addition, we can become more skillful in how we respond to the circumstances that we face. So that's the idea. And wanted to do a little practice. So I'm going to invite you to just get comfortable. And if you want, just kind of take in the room where you are. Just notice where you are in time and space. And then if it feels comfortable, you can take a couple of deep breaths. Allow yourself to be upright. If you'd like, you can close your eyes or just leave your eyes kind of half closed. And then what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to call to mind a circumstance that feels a little bit charged for you. And ideally, that's going to be on a scale of 1 to 10. That'll be like a 4 or 5, maybe. So, not something that's going to overwhelm you, but something that will start to make you feel perhaps a little uncomfortable. And as you call that circumstance or that story to mind, I'd like you to see if you can hold it at a distance. There's a couple of ways that we can do this. The first is to imagine that it's a scene as if you're watching a movie or a television show. And the circumstance is essentially something that you are witnessing rather than a part of. So we're just allowing in our mind's eye the ability to get some of that cognitive diffusion, to have some space between us and the circumstance. And as best we can, just noticing it with a sense of curiosity and openness. Try not to judge what's happening. Noticing if you have any sensations in your body. Noticing if the mind wants to assign good, bad, or perhaps the mind wants to assign some blame. If there's a narrative that goes deeper than that, if there's an emotion that arises. But again, just taking this as best we can as just an object of awareness within our larger field of awareness. And then the other thing that we can do as a form of cognitive diffusion is just a label. And what I'd like you to experiment with is the idea of kind of objectifying the experience in some sense. So we could say internally, there is the thought that there is a story that is being told. Because ultimately, this is kind of just popping up out of our consciousness, right? And we don't need to identify with it. We don't need to fuse our own experience with the story or the thought. And as we label it objectively, we begin to get that diffusion, that small space that begins to grow over time, or we can just notice it. And just notice as you witness this, how does your experience shift subtly or significantly? How is it that you're able to relate to this experience? And then the last thing I'd like you to experiment with is to imagine yourself in a balloon, like a hot air balloon. The circumstance that you're holding in your mind is here on Earth. And you, as the observer, are getting into this hot air balloon and you're floating high above the earth and just witnessing it getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And as you do that, the significance of the circumstance diminishes. And just notice as you do that what happens to the sensations in your body, if there's any sense of ease that perhaps grows even just a little bit. And if you want, you can even imagine floating out into space and starting to see the earth as if from space, giving yourself a much broader context, much broader field of awareness to kind of understand that this circumstance that perhaps was feeling very agitating initially is actually fairly insignificant. See if you can sense that. And when you're ready, can return to the physical space where you are and just notice, how has that cognitive diffusion been been able to give you that little distance that we can have in becoming more skillful in how we relate to our own lives.